Hello very much. My name is GlitchWitch.JPG. And I usually make videos about internet horror, including analog horror, digital horror, creepypastas, internet ARGs, internet urban legends, and sometimes I talk about survival horror video games. But today, we're going to talk about something a little different. As you can see, I'm sure, by the title and the thumbnail of this video, I'm going to be talking about Ethel Cain's latest project, Perverts. Please let me say that, YouTube. Please allow me to say that word. Thank you. I am not a music critic. I have made one video on this channel that has to do with music, but it's very much looking at how music impacts analog horror, which I had a lot of fun doing that, so I'm excited to talk about music again. But I'm not a music critic. I am not I know nothing about music theory. I just know, do I like it or do I dislike it? Ooh, that sounds cool. You get the drift. Anthony Fantano, I am not. I know he did review this album. I don't know what he thinks of it, and frankly, I don't really care. But I do present myself online as a horror, enthusiast and critic and commentarian. So that's how I can look at this album, because I fully believe that Perverts is a horror creation. A horror album, whatever you want to call it, and I think it proves how much horror as a genre can transcend any medium. There are few mediums that are as overreaching as horror. You can have a horror novel, movie, TV show, music, podcast, poetry, the very things that I discuss on this channel often are not really able to be nailed down by their medium, like for alternate reality games that contain multiple components and involve the audience as part of the story. In horror seems to be the thing that cutting edge, experimental art forms thrive in. And I think that Perverts is such a just pure, perfect example of this. So that's what I'm going to be discussing today, and also discussing how Ethel Cain has made me think about my relationship with horror in a completely new way. First of all, I just want to say sorry for the look. I know it's extra. I may have some people here that are not my typical audience. If you just came here to like see another person talk about Ethel Cain because you love Ethel Cain, I fear that I've been looking too boring in my recent videos. Ever since post McKinney Feeling Videos Volume 2, I just looked boring, so I overcorrected and I look crazy today. I fear that this morning I looked too hard at Miss Suzanne Toot and said, let me try. And obviously it's not as crazy or as good as she does it, but I digress. I felt like being a little extra today. Now, you may ask, who is Ethel Cain? I'm sure if you clicked on this you probably know, but if not, Ethel Cain is the name of a music project by a singer and songwriter musician named Hayden Anadonia. She has one album that was wildly successful, Preacher's Daughter. It came out a few years ago, and that album is very much a narrative telling the story of Ethel Cain, the character. And Preacher's Daughter is a horror project to me as well. It's a very tragic horror story about Ethel leaving her family, her very close-knit religious family, to go out on her own, and she ends up falling in love with a man named Isaiah, and he ends up killing her and then eating part of her. So that's crazy, right? Like, that's her debut album, and she has several EPs, has been putting out music for a while. I am fascinated by her. I think she's incredible. I am another person that really loves and admires religious aesthetics. She is very much coming from a Southern Protestant view with her music. She was raised in Florida. I am very much more a Catholic coded person, but I also live in the South, so I really appreciate her very unique perspective on Southern Baptist and Protestantism and all of that, because it is really its own unique breed. I've talked about this a bit before on my videos on the McKinney Family Home videos, because that deals with a small religious sect in Virginia, and very similar to the vibes that Ethel Cain puts out. I know that Nick, the creator of McKinney Family Home Videos, is a huge Ethel Cain fan as well, so I'm not surprised that, you know, he also gravitates to her as someone that's into that kind of look and aesthetic and form of storytelling. So I've always, you know, from the get admired her because she uses this religious lens to tell the stories that she tells. As much as I said, like, Preacher's Daughter is a horror album, and it absolutely is to me, this album, Perverts, is a lot different than Preacher's Daughter. Preacher's Daughter has a few poppy songs, I guess you could say. I would say the main one being American Teenager, which I've heard a lot. I'm sure it was I'm not on TikTok. I don't know if anyone's on TikTok right now. I'm recording this the day after it went dark. I don't know what it's going to be like by the time I put the video up. But I'm sure it was a TikTok social media song. And I think a lot of people were shocked by the sound of this new project, because it is very much an ambient drone album. And Hayden had talked about it, that's what this project was going to be. Notice, I apologize for just saying, like, this project, this album. I'm going to try not to say the title too many times because I don't want YouTube to get mad at me. That could be a word that could upset YouTube, which is silly. I don't know why it was shocking to anyone that that's what this was going to be. Like, she was very open about just wanting to make an album like that. I love both her sounds. I love songs like American Teenager and Crush, but I prefer this sound. There's a song on Preacher's Daughter called Ptolemea, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, that was the song that convinced me of Ethel Cain, where I was like, oh, it's like that, is it? I would say that was very much a sneak peek into what this entire album is. So I think it's very interesting because I've seen a lot of people make, like, memes and stuff about how freaked out they were by this album and how, you know, it's scary, it doesn't sound like her poppier stuff. And I've even seen people who like it kind of jump to, like, oh my god, it's so scary. And it is. It absolutely is. Like, it was so funny because my dear friend Julian posted in our, like, friend group Discord saying, oh, the new Ethel Cain is an analog horror album. And it kind of is in a weird way. For anyone that's watching this that is just watching this for Ethel Cain and doesn't really know what analog horror is a subgenre within internet horror, mostly on YouTube, of these kind of low-budget, lo-fi horror videos, series usually, that deal with, usually in its original state, analog technology, but it's kind of evolved from there, and they're just very hard to pin down. It's not a movie, it's not a TV show, you know, things like the Mandela Catalog, Local 58, the Monument Mythos, Greylock, and McKinney Family Home Videos are examples, I would say. I would say Preacher's Daughter is a feature-length horror film, and Perverts is an analog horror, if that makes sense. Like, that's the comparison that I would make, because it's a lot more experimental, and I feel like you have to dig for what's going on a little bit more, whereas I feel that Preacher's Daughter is very much a narrative that you can follow pretty easily. Not to say that Perverts is, like, really difficult to follow. I don't think that it is, but I think there's a lot more abstract concepts going on, and they're sprinkled throughout, and there's different ideas. It's not necessarily one cohesive thought. This album opens up with a song, with the title song, Perverts, and I just, from the get, I was hooked, because it opens with Hayden singing Near My God to Thee, which is a hymn from the 1800s that famously was the song that the band was playing when the Titanic went down. And then from there, there is a purported, I'm pretty sure it has been, I've talked about this recently, but a tape that the CNN, like, end of the world tape that was allegedly made, if, like, a nuclear strike was going to happen or a world-ending event that was supposed to be the last thing they played on TV, and it was a American military band playing Near My God to Thee. So we associate this as very much a doomsday, end of the line, something bad is happening, sad song. And it's funny because the actual song is about the biblical story of Jacob's dream when he ascends the ladder and sees the angels, which is, you know, a very hopeful, scary, of course, because angels in the Bible are scary, but, you know, not a end of the line story, right? And right off the bat, this sets up the entire idea that this album is playing with the idea of something positive, like a dream, and something negative, like a nightmare. It just encapsulates the entire vibe of this album. And as someone who, I'm very comforted by horror, that makes this album resonate with me. And I know, what is that dumbass quote? Art should comfort the disturbed and disturb the comforted. Yes. It's a little much. Little much. That's not what I'm exactly trying to say, but and I assume if, you know, a lot of my audience finds horror very comforting. Horror isn't always comforting to me, but it's always interesting, and it's always a journey, and it's always an experience. And I think that Hayden explores the range of horror on this because, you know, take, for example, the lead single, Punish, which, this is crazy that this was the lead single. Like, it sounds pretty chill compared to the rest of the album, but the subject matter is insane to be a lead single. I don't know why anyone was shocked that the rest of the album was like this when this was the lead single. This song is super dark. It is written from the perspective of a who is almost excusing his own behavior. And horror is like the only genre that can even attempt to crack subject matter like this. And I think that there's a big argument right now that, like, the real horror is trauma is overdone because of, like, all the A24 movies. Midsummer really did damage to society, I will say it. But we can't lose that as a tool because we need it. It is a very cathartic way for people to experience emotions. Because in this song, you know, the narrator essentially talks about being killed or attacked by the parent of one of his victims. That's heavy, but it's real. I mean, those things happen. And you don't want to speak to evil like that from that perspective, but it makes you understand that it exists and that it's out there. And horror is the only genre that I think can give you the perspective of someone who is evil like that. Like, there's a great film loosely based off the life of Henry Lee Lucas, who's a serial killer, named Henry Portrait of the Serial Killer, where you really understand his perspective and him. But you don't ever sympathize with him, and this song is not sympathizing with the narrator whatsoever. It makes you uncomfortable the more you think about it, but it makes you reflect and ponder, like, that, you know, evil is just normal people. You wouldn't know necessarily. I love that she was willing to go there, with such a dark thing. And, you know, it sounds beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful, slow, peaceful sounding songs on the album, which just really makes it even scarier, you know? It's the trick of being lulled in by something sweet and beautiful, and underneath it's really evil, and is another great pillar of horror, tenet of horror. The thing that made me want to make this video is not necessarily the album itself, but a concept that Hayden has put within this album that she made a video essay on. She is a fellow video essay diva. Love that for her. This one that I have up on screen, genuinely good. Genuinely insightful. I know that the title would make you think like, oh, this is a shitpost. Genuine. I agree with everything that I have personal experience with. I agree with her on that video. She's I love her video essays. If you love a girl rambling, go. Run, don't walk to Miss Ethel Cain's YouTube channel. I'm so serious. Like, I lost hours on Friday watching her video essays. But, I digress. She has a video called The Ring, the Great Dark, and Proximity to God. And this is explored on the song Pole Drone on the album. But essentially, what she is talking about. She explains in this video this idea that she has. And I'm not saying this is her original idea. I don't think she's even saying that. She has just explained it in a way that really made it make sense for me, but how something can bring you closer to God. And not God, the man with the white beard, father of Jesus, but whatever God is to you, to a state of bliss, to a state of, you know, ecstasy, essentially. So she has it set up, and I definitely encourage you, if you're interested in this concept, please watch her video on it, because she's going to explain it better than I am. But I'll have a picture of her holding up her graphic of it here. Essentially, we live in a place called the Great Dark, which is everyday life. It's not bad. It's called the Great Dark, but it is going to work, cooking, cleaning, day-to-day life. Not bad, but not necessarily special, right? You're in the Great Dark, and something that means a lot to you and impacts you a lot is a ring for you. In the video, Hayden talks about music a lot as her ring, like specific songs, but it can be anything. In the album, Perverts, it's sex and self-pleasure, but movies, nature, people, like anything can be a ring, but she talks a lot about music in this video because she's a musician and music's very important to her, so it makes sense. And essentially, you're pulled up to the ring by whatever your ring is, and then when it hits like a climax moment, you go through something she calls the sigh. So essentially, like in her example, like the part of the song that really hits you and makes you feel the most you could feel, that pulls you through the sigh and you enter the divine theater. And she explains that the divine theater is not becoming like one with God, it is simply being in the presence of God. And again, not God the Father, but, you know, not even enlightenment, just like euphoria, you know, a feeling of wholeness. But, you know, she says you can't stay there. This thing, you know, your ring will bring you to the divine theater for only so long, and then you descend back into the Great Dark, because it would essentially be too much. It would be overwhelming if you stayed in the divine theater forever. And she also talks about something called the hole, which is essentially when you were depressed and pulled down, you fall into the hole, and pretty much everyone spends time in the hole, but if you, you know, revert to the hole for too long, it can trap you, which I think is very true of depression and any mental illness. I've certainly found myself in the hole before. But this clicked for me. Like, this really, I watched this video and it hit me over the head. I don't know why. Of course, like I said, I don't think this is some new concept, but seeing it visualized like this and hearing her explain it like this, it just really clicked for me. And I am someone who has chased spirituality for a long time. I grew up agnostic, but I had, you know, family members that tried to get me to go into like Catholicism and stuff, and it kind of backfired, and I became very frightened of like Catholic imagery and stuff, and of course the way that, you know, our brains are fucked up by that stuff now. I love it. But I've wanted it so bad. Like sometimes I find myself jealous of people who can experience like true religious faith. You know, I've gone to churches, you know, all over America and in Britain and, you know, some of the biggest cathedrals in Paris and stuff, and I've just wanted that moment where it made sense for me, and it never has. And it frustrated me always. You know, I've talked about this a little bit before, but like I made my thesis in undergrad on the Pennsylvania Grand Jury Report, which was a report that looked into Catholic essay in specifically Pennsylvania, and it was the way that I framed this project. So I'm a graphic designer, so it was a graphic design project. It was essentially like a PSA, you know, telling Catholics, you know, advocate for yourself, you know, you deserve better, you shouldn't let these people, you know, pervert your faith, essentially. That, you know, religion in its core, spirituality in its core is not the problem, it's the institution. And I think that I went about it that way because I want to protect the idea of believing so much in something. Like, that's so pure and beautiful to me because I can't experience it. So I always want to, you know, protect that because you know, these horrible people who have, you know, used something innocent and beautiful and corrupted it for those people, and that's not fair. But I realized the way that Hayden was describing this, that my ring is horror. All my great rings in my life have been horror. It's not all horror. For me, it's liminal horror. Horror has impacted me in my life more than anything else. You know, I grew up as a very timid, shy, anxious child. I was scared of Scooby-Doo. Like, I was scared of anything, you name it. And when I was a teenager, I saw the Blair Witch Project, and it literally changed my life because I got it. Like, horror made sense to me. It clicked. And, you know, that movie really is the blueprint for everything that I talk about and study now. It's an ARG. It's a found footage movie. Like, without that, we wouldn't have creepypastas and analog horror and ARGs and any... I mean, ARGs existed before the Blair Witch Project, but as far as internet ARGs go, it is one of the OGs. So, that was a huge impact on me. It is something that allowed me and my father to grow closer. Not that we weren't close before, but like it is a huge part of our relationship now, and really brought us together in my late teens. And I have so many incredible memories with him because of that. My husband and I's relationship was very much initially based on our shared love of horror. I mean, our first date, we didn't know it was a date at the time, but I look back and jokingly say it was our first date, was watching Cannibal Holocaust. Like, we danced to the theme from Cannibal Holocaust at our wedding. It is integral to how we fell in love with each other. The ring, the specific ring that made me realize that horror does this for me is I saw the movie Skin of a Ring by Kyle Edward Ball in a very vulnerable moment in my life, a very transitional phase. I was an adult, I had my own place, I had a job, I was about to get married, I had a lot of stressful work things going on, and I was just like very overwhelmed because let me tell you, any of you that are planning weddings, it will be okay. But if you're like me and you don't live anywhere near your family and you force all your family to come down to you, you get in your head. And I was very stressed out. It was literally like a week and a half before the wedding that we saw this. And that movie hit me and stayed with me in a way that has literally changed my life. And the feeling that I felt while watching that movie is what she describes as the sigh into the divine theater. And I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you if it wasn't for Skinamarink, because that made me really fall in love with analog horror, and then, you know, from there, internet horror. And I have found a happiness in this stuff that I haven't felt maybe in my entire life. Like, I like graphic design. That's my job. That's my career. It's not the reason I get up in the morning, though. This stuff now, it is the reason I get up in the morning. I don't make these videos because I want to make money off YouTube, or I want to, you know, become famous and have a bunch of views. Literally 5 of you could watch this, and I would keep making them, because making them and watching this stuff and engaging with this stuff literally gets me up in the morning. And it's given me a drive and a purpose more than anything else in my life, and it can all be linked back to the Blair Witch Project for me. So, does that not sound like what religious people talk about when they talk about God? And yes, maybe it sounds blasphemous for me to say that horror is my God, that Skinamarink or, you know, the Backrooms is my God. It's not my God, but it fills me. And that's the whole thing that she's saying, though. She's not calling God in this metaphor of the divine theater actually God, but it is this state of euphoria and purpose. And really, I can't think of many things that get me there that aren't related to horror. Blair Witch Project for sure, Skinamarink for sure. I think the Monument Mythos, which is an analog horror series, that has certainly been a ring for me. David Lynch, he recently passed away. That, you know, has brought me to this video as well, because I think a lot of his work when I was a teenager, also still not sure about horror, the type of dread and like liminality that you have in his work in projects like Twin Peaks, like Lost Highway, like Eraserhead, those are rings, all of those for me. And I just, it makes it feel a lot more special to me. I have struggled for a long time with my relationship to internet horror and how people don't take it seriously. You know, trying to explain to people that I'm what I do on YouTube and things like that don't get it. You know, it's hard to be like, well, I talk about YouTube videos. But it's more than that, because it makes me feel more than that, and it makes you feel more than that. I know that. I know I've had conversations with people who I know feel exactly the same way as me. And, you know, I think horror probably, I think a lot of people will find rings in horror, whether it's horror novels, movies, series, whatever it is, because it has existed forever, and it exists in so many forms, like I said at the beginning of this video. You know, it is a powerful way to explore the human psyche and explore all of the pain and hardship that we can endure and how we can get through it, in a way that I think is cathartic. Horror to me is very cathartic, and that's what I felt when I listened to this album, and when I heard her talk about this concept of the divine theater. It just really did click for me, and it made me so grateful to be a horror fan, and to be talking about these things, and to take them seriously, because I think they should be taken seriously, because even if it's just me and 10 other people, that, you know, those are things that are bringing me and 10 other people to a state of, you know, bliss and beauty. For me, liminal horror does it. I don't know why. I think it has a lot to do with taking you out of your element and kind of putting you in a trance-like state, that allows you to pass through the sigh and into the divine theater. I think I feel more ripe for it when I'm watching something like Skinamarink, because it really puts my guard down, and the fear goes from being like a full body tension to a warmth eventually. That's how I can describe when I watch anything that's like Skinamarink or analog horror, things like that. So I just, it is a very transformational experience. And Skinamarink is the one that I keep going back to because that's the most I've felt the like physical transformational feeling while watching it. I mean, that movie scared the shit out of me. But when I think about it, I feel warm because it's that memory of reaching the Divine Theater, essentially. And it's just cool to be able to label it and to be able to articulate it. So I'm very thankful to Hayden for making this video. I think that everyone is going to come out of listening to Perverts feeling differently. I've seen people say it's evil, it's scary. I find it very comforting on re-listen. Like, I get that warm feeling, the same feeling that I get, you know, when I think about Skinamarink. And perhaps, you know, Perverts is a ring for me because of that. And I hope she knows that her music is definitely a ring for many people. And I just think it's so great that she is such a unique artist. I just really like Ethel Cain's perspective, and I really encourage you, if you're interested in any of this, please go watch her videos because I think she's very interesting to listen to. She has like an hour-and-a-half video about like the haunting experiences she's felt in her life, and it's fascinating. I really really enjoyed it. But you know, I just wanted to make this video. It's kind of a ramble video where I'm just kind of explaining how grateful I am for horror. I think, you know, horror is such a vast thing that people can experience it in so many different ways, and I think the thing that's beautiful is someone else can feel exactly the same way I feel about horror, but about a completely different subset of horror, you know? So that just goes to show how vast and broad, kind of all-encompassing horror is. So I'm so happy to be here online talking to you about horror, specifically my flavor of horror. And I hope that, you know, you'll stick around and we can find more rings together. Yes, thank you so much for watching. I'd like to thank my YouTube members. We have the Creepypasta OCs up on screen. And then in Survival Horror Emos, we have E-Rob and So-Called Punk. And then in Analog Horror Scary Face, we have Kira Coffer. If you have any rings of your own that you can think of, feel free to comment below. I'd be curious to know, especially if any of them are like internet horror projects, because if I haven't covered them, I absolutely would like to cover your rings. Let me know if you're a returning watcher of GlitchWitch.JPG, if you know, like videos like this that are a little less typical, leaving like the internet horror of it all. Because this was fun to make. I don't think I'll make videos like this all the time, but I kind of couldn't shake the feeling that this album and this concept of the Divine Theater gave me. So I had fun. But as always, please suggest any internet horror related things below that you'd like me to cover. I always love user suggestions. I even had someone comment last week referencing Ethel Cain in regards to the video I made last week, so that made me extra excited that I was already working on this video. But yeah, you know, I'm going to do the shill thing, like, subscribe, comment, all that. If you would like to become a YouTube member, there's a join button next to the subscribe button. But I appreciate you so much. Go listen to some Ethel Cain, and goodbye very much.